motorcycle icons are crumbling before our eyes. Once untouchable brands are now drowning in debt, collapsing sales, and bitter betrayals. Harley isn't the only one in trouble. Others are on the edge too. Watch till the end, because these failures won't just affect bikers. They'll hit your community, your economy, and maybe even the road you ride on. The betrayal of the Rumble. Harley did not just pivot, they broke a covenant. For over a century, the Harley Davidson name stood for a promise. A throaty rumble, chrome that caught the sun, and the sense of American freedom rattling through every bone in your body. Riders expected innovation, yes, but they also expected respect for the sound, feel, and style that made them fall in love with motorcycles in the first place. When the board and its executives announced a dramatic focus on electric models, that promise cracked. Suddenly, the roar was gone, replaced with synthetic sounds piped through speakers. The bikes that once symbolized rebellion now looked and felt like gadgets. Loyalists felt blindsided. Entry-level models like the Sportster 883 or the Road King Standard had long been gateways into the Harley family, teaching generations how to fall in love with two wheels. Eliminating those models was more than a business decision. It was an erasure of memory. Imagine telling a blues guitarist that the guitar no longer needs strings, or asking a cowboy to trade his horse for a silent drone. For Harley's most devoted riders, that was how the pivot to electric sounded. Soulless, sterile, and stripped of meaning. The sense of betrayal spread quickly in forums, rallies, and dealerships. Riders began saying Harley was abandoning them, chasing a Silicon Valley dream instead of honoring Milwaukee steel. Their shock soon turned into open outrage, and as the community grumbled louder, the financial numbers began to echo the pain. The ledger starts to bleed. When the numbers collapse, even legends cannot hide. By the year 2022, Harley's global sales had already started to dip. Within 2 short years, those sales collapsed by more than 20%. To most companies, a slowdown is survivable, but to Harley, a brand that markets lifestyle as much as motorcycles, this was devastating. The books painted an even uglier picture by the end of 2024. That year, motorcycle revenue nosedived by 60% compared to the year before. The steepest collapse in Harley's long history had arrived under Jochen Seitz's watch. Dealership managers across the country watched their showrooms turn into graveyards. Salesmen who once moved bikes every weekend now stood idle beside rows of machines that looked more like display furniture than rides. The fourth quarter of 2024 captured the disaster in harsh relief. Shipments dropped to fewer than 150,000 worldwide, a 17% fall compared to the prior year. Meanwhile, quarterly revenue fell to $420 million, nearly half of the previous year's haul. The company posted a $214 million operating loss in that same quarter, bleeding money as quickly as its riders' patience. Investors responded with panic. Harley stock, once trading near $50 a share, plunged to around $20 by 2025. Half of shareholder value had evaporated, and in one brutal month, the stock dropped another 22%. These numbers were not mere statistics. They were the financial echo of riders' betrayal. And that echo grew louder when Harley's boldest electric gamble stumbled into ridicule. If you've made it this far, you already know this isn't just another business story. It's personal. Hit that subscribe button if you see what's happening and drop a comment below. LiveWire. 30 grand for silence. Harley tried to sell the future at the price of a small car. When the LiveWire electric motorcycle launched, executives tagged it with a jaw-dropping sticker price of nearly $30,000. For that sum, buyers received sleek design, rapid acceleration, and complete silence. But silence was never what Harley riders wanted. They bought the brand for its chest-rattling thunder, not a digital whir that sounded more like a kitchen blender than a motorcycle. The LiveWire quickly became a punchline. In its first full year of release, fewer than 1,000 units sold. Dealers jokingly called them dust collectors, as shiny electric bikes sat untouched while customers wandered toward traditional models. Harley eventually slashed the price by more than $7,000, a desperate move that signaled panic rather than vision. Even then, demand barely twitched. Riders shrugged, insisting that no discount could replace the soul of the Rumble. Meanwhile, the company had already sunk more than $100 million into research, development, and marketing for the LiveWire project. The result was not revolution, it was humiliation. By 2024, LiveWire's revenue dropped another 32%. Instead of pulling Harley forward, the electric experiment became an anchor, dragging the company deeper into crisis. And yet, even as the LiveWire fiasco grew obvious, leadership doubled down on their vision, led by men whom many riders believed did not understand motorcycles at all. Guard the rider, not the brand. Gear up with helmet, gloves, boots. Link in description. Sneakers on the steel throne. You cannot A/B test soul. That was the sentiment echoing across dealerships when riders looked at Harley's leadership team. Jochen Zeitz, the man presiding over the collapse, had built his career not in Milwaukee's machine shops but in the fashion industry, running Puma sneakers. To riders, that resume alone was a red flag. A man who sold shoes was suddenly in charge of preserving one of the most iconic motorcycle brands on earth. The disconnect was too glaring to ignore. When Zeitz finally stepped down as CEO in October of 2025, the board attempted to signal change. Yet the sting remained because Zeitz would continue whispering as an advisor until February of 2026. To many, it felt like keeping the captain of the sinking ship in the wheelhouse. Riders saw betrayal. Investors saw indecision. Then the board appointed Arthur Stars, a man known for running Topgolf and working in the restaurant sector, not building bikes. Though Stars gamely bought a Harley and took riding lessons before his first day, skepticism persisted. Could an outsider steeped in consumer entertainment understand the gravity of a heritage brand that lived or died on authenticity? Cynicism swelled. Riders muttered that Harley was being run like a consulting project instead of a motorcycle company. Investors wondered if leadership even grasped the cultural stakes. The board's decision was meant to steady the ship, but to many it looked like rearranging helmets on a bike already sliding off the road. And the next chapters of Harley's saga would reveal just how deep the break with tradition had become. Made in America until it wasn't. Heritage is a promise, not a logo. For more than 100 years, Harley Davidson sold itself as a rolling piece of American identity. The brand did not just market motorcycles, it marketed Milwaukee steel, American jobs, and the pride of buying something born on domestic soil. That is why riders erupted when they learned that Harley quietly shifted portions of production overseas, building plants in Thailand as a way to sidestep the bruising tariffs of the trade wars. Executives defended the decision as a survival move, but workers and loyal riders saw it as a betrayal. The math of tariffs was brutal. When the European Union slapped retaliatory duties on American motorcycles, Harley faced the choice of eating the costs or losing one of its biggest markets. Thailand became the escape hatch. The company argued this was about global competitiveness, but for riders who had spent decades defending Harley as uniquely American, the optics were unforgivable. If they wanted a cheaper import, they could buy a Honda. Harley was supposed to mean something more. Union voices and patriotic groups called the shift a sellout. Dealers fielded angry questions from customers asking whether the bike on the showroom floor was truly American anymore. What once was a badge of pride had become a source of shame. That shame cut particularly deep with the next generation of riders who now saw the entry point into Harley's world being dismantled. Killing the gateway bikes. When you cancel the on-ramp, you cancel the future. Harley's decision to axe beloved entry-level models like the Sportster 883, the Sportster 1200, and the Road King Standard stunned dealers and angered enthusiasts. These bikes were more than machines. They were initiation rites. Generations of riders took their first long trips on a Sportster, saved paychecks for a Road King, and joined the Harley family through affordable, accessible models. Killing them was like tearing out the welcome mat. For young riders, the gateway bikes were essential. At a time when younger generations already faced student debt, high living costs, and fewer discretionary dollars, entry-level models gave them a way to join the culture without breaking the bank. Removing them sent a clear message. Harley was no longer interested in nurturing newcomers. The ladder into the lifestyle had been kicked away. Dealers privately fumed that management was starving the pipeline that kept the culture alive. Without new blood, the brand risked aging out. The frustration grew as riders noticed the inconsistency. Police departments still rode stripped-down road kings because they were reliable, simple, and affordable. But those same machines were unavailable to civilians. Instead of offering what the market clearly wanted, Harley told new riders to look elsewhere. And elsewhere they went. That exodus bled into the broader buying class, who soon discovered that even the cheapest Harley now came with a sticker shock that made ownership feel out of reach. The sticker shock snub. Raise the cover charge, shrink the party. That was the effect when Harley pushed the base price of its cheapest bikes beyond $12,000. For decades, Harley cultivated an image of accessibility. Blue-collar workers, veterans, and young dreamers could aspire to ride a Harley without mortgaging their future. By inflating the entry ticket, management effectively slammed the door on thousands of potential buyers. Everyday enthusiasts began comparing Harley's prices to practical alternatives. Why spend 12 grand on a stripped Harley when a rival brand offered a dependable cruiser for thousands less? For many middle-class buyers, Harley ownership shifted from dream to fantasy. The disappointment was palpable at dealerships, where would-be riders walked out shaking their heads. They loved the culture, they wanted the community, but they could not justify the inflated cost. Dealers absorbed the brunt of that disillusionment. Showrooms emptied of first-time buyers, parts sales slowed, and the ripple carried into service departments. Raising prices might have pleased short-term investors chasing margins, but it alienated the very people who kept the brand alive. Disappointment turned to bitterness as Harley seemed to chase exclusivity at the cost of community. And when the board finally announced a leadership change, that bitterness curdled into cynicism. Change the captain, keep the compass. Harley swapped helmets, but kept the same map. After years of collapsing sales, Jochen Zeitz announced he would step down as chief executive in October of 2025. On the surface, the move looked like accountability. Yet in the same breath, the board confirmed Zeitz would remain as an advisor until February of 2026. To riders and investors, that looked less like change and more like continuity. The board then handed the keys to Arthur Stars, a man with a background in entertainment and hospitality, not in motorcycles. He had run Topgolf and restaurant chains. While Stars gamely bought a Harley and enrolled in riding lessons before his first day, the optics were unavoidable. To the community, this felt like another outsider with no grease under his fingernails telling riders how to live their culture. The cynicism deepened. Leadership looked like a rotating cast of consultants rather than guardians of heritage. Riders muttered that Harley's compass had not shifted at all. Outsiders still ran the show. American heritage still felt diluted, and the gap between corporate strategy and community culture only widened. The decision to swap captains without changing course left many convinced that the worst was yet to come. And the cost of that gamble would become brutally clear in the next phase of Harley's unraveling. The Electric Albatross. LiveWire did not just miss the market, it burned the clock. When Harley Davidson spun its electric division into a separate company, the pitch was bold. Executives promised agility, innovation, and a chance to attract tech-savvy riders who would never touch a gas-powered cruiser. Investors were told that separating LiveWire would unlock hidden value, but what followed looked less like a rebirth and more like a slow-motion train wreck. Sales were painfully thin. In its early years, LiveWire barely cracked 4 digits, selling fewer than 1,000 bikes. Revenue slid instead of climbing, and the company posted continuing net losses. By 2024, LiveWire revenue dropped more than 30% compared to the prior year. Even worse, Dealers had to slash thousands of dollars off the sticker price just to move a single unit. By late 2025, discounts of $7,000 or more were common. To riders, that was not opportunity. It was a red flag. To investors, it was disbelief that Harley had burned more than $100 million in research and development only to end up here. The mockery became relentless. Riders joked that LiveWire was less a revolution than a clearance rack. Investors muttered about money lit on fire. And as LiveWire bled cash quarter after quarter, political headaches piled up, forcing Harley to rely even more heavily on global workarounds. The Tariff Trap. Policy roulette rarely pays the house. Harley Davidson discovered that the hard way when the European Union targeted American motorcycles with steep retaliatory tariffs during the height of the trade wars. The duties meant that every Harley shipped from the United States suddenly became far more expensive overseas. Faced with a devastating loss of competitiveness, Harley made a fateful decision: open new production lines in Thailand. From a political standpoint, the move made sense. By localizing production, Harley could dodge tariffs and keep a foothold in crucial European markets. From a cultural standpoint, it was dynamite. The brand that wrapped itself in the American flag was now leaning on Southeast Asian plants to escape policy crossfire. Trade experts nodded at the strategic logic, but riders and patriotic groups saw nothing but betrayal. What good was a Harley if it did not roar out of Milwaukee or York? The tension between policy survival and cultural authenticity grew sharper every year. As Washington and Brussels played their game of tariff tit-for-tat, Harley found itself stuck between investor expectations and community outrage. Politicians used Harley as a symbol in their speeches, either mocking it for selling out or defending it as collateral damage of bad trade policy. Yet the practical result was unchanged. Global manufacturing became essential for survival. That survival, however, came at the cost of loyalty at home. And no one felt that pain more directly than the dealers who depended on steady sales to keep their doors open. When the dealership goes quiet. Dealers do not sell spreadsheets, they sell belonging. For decades, Harley showrooms doubled as community hubs. Riders came not only to buy motorcycles, but to swap stories, attend events, and join a lifestyle. When the company's strategy faltered, that lifeblood dried up. Dealers began closing at an alarming rate. Those who remained open often described their showrooms as graveyards, where bikes gathered dust. The numbers told the story of despair. In 2024, Harley shipped just under 150,000 motorcycles worldwide, a 17% drop from the year before. That decline left local dealerships gasping. Staff were cut, mechanics lost hours, and side revenue from parts and apparel cratered. Communities that once rallied around weekend rides and charity runs found their anchor stores shuttered. For many small towns, losing a Harley dealership felt like losing a piece of identity. The personal pain was severe. Owners who had run dealerships for decades watched their investments evaporate. Longtime salespeople, once proud ambassadors of the brand, suddenly faced unemployment. Local riders complained that they had to drive hours just to find a service center. Harley's corporate slides could describe these closures as network optimization, but to the people on the ground it felt like abandonment. And as showrooms went silent, all eyes turned to the incoming CEO to see whether he could rebuild trust from the ground up. Star's uphill battle. You can learn to ride in a weekend, but earn trust? That takes years. When the Harley board announced that Arthur Stars, a man known for leading Topgolf and restaurant chains, would take over as CEO, the reaction was a mix of curiosity and skepticism. To his credit, Stars did not wait for optics to crush him. Before his first official day, he purchased a Harley of his own and took riding lessons to ensure he at least knew the feel of the road. That gesture earned him a few nods of respect, but did little to erase the towering doubts. The urgency was undeniable. Stars inherited a company bleeding money from its electric gamble, alienating riders with overseas production, and losing community trust as dealerships closed. His challenge was not simply financial, it was cultural. He had to prove that he understood Harley's heritage while steering it toward a viable future. Investors demanded discipline, while riders demanded authenticity. Balancing those two forces would require delicate decisions that could not be delayed. The road ahead was steep. Riders judged by instinct, not PowerPoint. Communities demanded more than slogans, and investors expected results without excuses. Stars faced the daunting task of winning over groups that felt burned again and again by corporate missteps. Whether he could bridge that divide remained uncertain, but one truth was already clear. Harley's next phase would ripple far beyond its own brand, reshaping the competitive and political landscape that defined motorcycling itself. Rivals smell blood. When Harley stumbles, rivals sprint. The collapse of Harley Davidson's sales and cultural credibility opened the door for competitors who had long been overshadowed. Indian Motorcycles seized the moment by rolling out cruisers that carried the retro aesthetic Harley once owned. Their models offered approachable price points, reliable performance, and the heritage appeal that Harley seemed to be abandoning. Riders disillusioned with Harley's corporate detours suddenly saw Indian as the more authentic American choice. Honda and other Japanese brands capitalized on Harley's retreat as well. They marketed dependable cruisers and touring bikes at prices thousands of dollars below Harley's inflated entry point. Riders who wanted value without sacrificing quality found these alternatives irresistible. Meanwhile, European manufacturers like BMW and Ducati began winning riders who once would have never considered leaving Harley's orbit. They leaned on engineering prowess and long-distance capability, presenting themselves as the modern evolution of motorcycling, while Harley wrestled with its identity crisis. Electric newcomers also smelled opportunity. Rivian-inspired startups and European EV motorcycle firms pitched themselves as fresh, agile, and affordable alternatives to LiveWire's bloated price tag. The message was simple. Harley's missteps left an entire market segment up for grabs. Competitors were not just nibbling at Harley's heels, they were lunging for the core of its business. That aggressive competition soon intersected with another storm, the political arena, where Harley became a symbolic pawn in trade wars. Tariffs become political ammunition. Trade wars do not end at the port, they end at the dealership. When the United States and the European Union clashed over tariffs, Harley Davidson became a high-profile casualty. Motorcycles were slapped with duties that doubled or even tripled their cost in European markets. Suddenly, Harley was not just a motorcycle brand, it was a political football, tossed back and forth by leaders in Washington and Brussels. Politicians used Harley's name to score points. American officials called it proof of unfair European protectionism. European leaders pointed at Harley's overseas factories as evidence that American firms were gaming the system. The brand's once proud reputation was reduced to a talking point in speeches and debates. Harley did not ask for this role, but its image as an American icon made it impossible to avoid. Every factory decision, every shipment adjustment, and every overseas plant became ammunition in a geopolitical contest. The fallout hit riders on the ground. Dealers in Europe saw prices climb beyond reach, while American dealerships faced questions from patriotic customers angry at the Thailand move. What had once been a brand selling freedom now symbolized entanglement in global politics. The national drama drowned out Harley's own marketing and turned its bikes into symbols of controversy. And while politicians traded sound bites, workers and young riders began organizing for their own reasons, pushing back with defiance. Unions and youth push back. A movement does not need a headquarters, it needs a reason. For Harley's workers, that reason was survival. Union members argued that outsourcing jobs to Thailand gutted the company's American identity. They marched, rallied, and spoke out about the loss of factory pride. Local economies in Milwaukee and York depended on Harley paychecks, and when those jobs looked threatened, resistance hardened. The labor voice grew louder, demanding that Harley reconnect to its roots. At the same time, a new generation of riders pushed back from another angle. Younger enthusiasts wanted motorcycles that were simpler, cheaper, and truer to the spirit of riding. They mocked Harley's fixation on tech-heavy dashboards and synthetic sounds. Instead, they gravitated toward stripped-down machines or even second-hand models, proving there was still hunger for affordable authenticity. Their message was blunt. If Harley would not provide it, they would find it elsewhere. This dual pressure, workers demanding jobs and youth demanding accessibility, created a groundswell of defiance. Harley faced not just an investor crisis, but a cultural uprising from the very people who once kept the brand alive. And if leadership could not respond, the existential question of Harley's survival would move from speculation to reality. That question became unavoidable in the next chapter, where the company's very soul came under examination. The soul test. You cannot buy authenticity. You have to build it every model year. Harley Davidson now stands at a crossroads unlike any in its history. On one side lies the temptation to become just another lifestyle brand, selling apparel, licensing logos, and leaning on nostalgia while the motorcycles fade. On the other side lies the harder path, recommitting to motorcycles that embody the raw authenticity riders crave. The company must decide if it will still be a motorcycle maker first or a corporate logo factory chasing quarterly margins. The stakes are existential. If Harley cannot win back trust, competitors will permanently absorb its market share. If it cannot re-establish credibility with workers and unions, the American-made promise will remain broken. If it cannot design bikes that young riders can actually afford, the culture will age out and disappear. The threat is not distant. It is already here, visible in collapsing sales, silent showrooms, and rivals surging ahead. Yet opportunity still exists. Harley's name remains iconic. If it brings back accessible models, restores affordability, and reclaims genuine American production, it could spark a rebirth. But time is short. Every year of indecision deepens the damage. Harley's soul is on the line, and the next generation will decide whether the brand still rumbles with authenticity or fades into history as another logo that lost its meaning. Harley's downfall isn't just a story, it's a warning. If you've watched this far, you already know the stakes are bigger than bikes. Subscribe now, turn on notifications, and join this community of people who refuse to be blindsided, because the next collapse won't wait, and missing it could cost more than you realize.